Convicted felon Donald Trump is starting a civil war across the United States, with his personal militia inciting violence against Americans, shooting media reporters, and amassing an army outside to protect himself for when he declares martial law. Check out our anti-Trump store with Make Lying Wrong Again pins and hats, Resist Fascism and I Did That stickers, and our new Trump Always Chickens Out taco stickers at ProfessorPride.com. This week, convicted felon Donald Trump sent his personal militia to Los Angeles, California to incite violence against our own citizens. Some of those citizens ended up being severely injured, media reporters were shot by police for no reason, Trump is calling for the arrest of California Governor Gavin Newsom, and House Speaker Mike Johnson is literally calling for the governor to be physically tortured. So how did we get here? What does this mean, and what is about to happen? Well, first, you should know this is far from the first time convict Donald Trump sent his mob to commit violence against American citizens. On June 1st, 2020, during his first term, Trump sent hundreds of police officers in riot gear to use tear gas, pepper balls, sting ball grenades, flash grenades, smoke canisters, rubber bullets, and batons to disperse the peaceful protesters outside of St. John's Church in Washington, D.C. They were peacefully protesting on behalf of Black Lives Matter after an unarmed man named George Floyd was brutally murdered by police officers in Minnesota the week prior. But according to those in Trump's inner circle at the time, Trump told the U.S. general to, quote, just shoot the peaceful protesters so he can stand in front of St. John's Church and hold the Bible upside down for a photo op. Yes, the President of the United States reportedly told his top official to shoot U.S. citizens so that he could take a photo. After the dust all settled from that attack on peaceful protesters, Trump started calling the opposition Antifa. You might have heard of it, because it literally translates to anti-fascism, which means you don't want a dictator, especially one like Trump. When Trump lost the 2020 election, he once again sent his mob after his enemies. At the time, this included his own vice president and U.S. Congress representatives and senators, inciting the first insurrection on the Capitol since the first Civil War. So Trump telling his mob to go and attack or even murder citizens is not really out of the ordinary for Trump. What makes this week so unique is the timing. For about a week now, Trump has been ordering the military to move hundreds of tanks, personnel carriers, and other combat vehicles to Washington, D.C. for his birthday parade on June 14th. It will be the first time in history a military parade was ever done on American soil, and it looks eerily similar to Russia's annual Victory Parade, done in honor of Trump's reported commander, Vladimir Putin. With hundreds of military vehicles being amassed in Washington, it makes a lot of people credibly frightened that the purpose of amassing this weaponry in one place is for more than just a silly parade. It's long been circulated in Trump's inner circle that he wants to declare martial law, get rid of the Constitution that he never read anyway, and get rid of Congress and the Supreme Court so he can become a dictator just like his commanding officer, Vladimir Putin. But if he were to declare martial law and overstep his executive power in a way that has never been done before, he would first want to make sure that he's well protected. So he would probably want an army outside his front door to protect himself before declaring martial law, which is understandably going to make a lot of people upset. And in order to declare such an executive overreach of power, he would first need something to happen in order to justify such a move. Well, that's where Los Angeles comes in, because nothing would give you that causation more than starting a civil war on your own soil. That's likely why around 3 p.m. local time on June 6th, 1 week prior to this supposed parade, Trump sent his militia to Los Angeles, California. Now, it's important to note that these are not federal agents in any way, shape, or form. Remember, one of Trump's first official acts in his second term was pardoning 1,500 January 6th rioters who committed treason against our country. Now, many of them have put on face masks and have now been appointed members of ICE, abducting American citizens, especially anyone who doesn't look like the all-white world these racist bigots want to live in, and sending them to foreign countries like El Salvador, where many satellite images suggest our citizens are being slaughtered like concentration camps. Trump is also hiring people from terrorist organizations and hate groups across the country to join ICE in their raids, which is why many of these supposed agents are covering their faces while they abduct American citizens. They don't want you to know their true identity, which is interesting, considering wearing a face mask is literally the only thing that we asked Republicans to do during the COVID pandemic. But back then, wearing a face mask was too difficult for them. Shortly after Trump's militia started arresting hard-working people in a Home Depot parking lot and in the Fashion District in LA on June 6th, hundreds of people across the city came together to peacefully protest. But the first act of violence came minutes later, when a member of Trump's militia ran over a peaceful protester with his truck. By 10 p.m. local time, LAPD posted a message on social media saying the peaceful protest was, quote, an unlawful assembly, in all caps for some reason, even though the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution gives anyone the right to peacefully assemble for reasons just like this. The next morning, rumors spread that Trump's militia was heading to a Home Depot in Paramount, a suburb of LA. Protesters went there to stop the abductions from happening, and while the crowd remained peaceful all day long, Trump's militia used tear gas and flashbangs to purposefully hurt the protesters. While the mayor of LA and California's governor were working together to address the peaceful protest, Trump decided to declare war. Around 6 p.m., Trump signed a presidential memorandum authorizing the deployment of 2,000 National Guard members to LA, the first time National Guard was deployed without the request of the state since 1965. And even in 1965, it was the governor of Alabama who was racist, and it was the president who sent the National Guard to protect the peaceful protesters from the police crossing the Selma Bridge in Alabama. But in this case, 2,100 National Guard officers arrived around 4 a.m. the next day, protecting a federal building in downtown LA. Thousands more peaceful protesters showed up and began walking around town with signs reading, "Fight Trump." In response, the LAPD went on tactical alert, meaning no officers could go home until the protests are silenced. Some protesters did throw objects down off of an overpass onto an empty roadway and shot small fireworks down on top of police vehicles. But no officers were outside of their vehicles at the time, and no one was on the roadway below. By this time, it was more than 48 hours of Trump's armed militia and LAPD tear gassing and injuring peaceful protesters. So this escalation in the protest was bound to happen, and it's not exactly unwarranted either. Across town, an unmarked van suddenly started ramming into peaceful protesters on the sidewalks around 9:20 p.m. He struck several peaceful protesters and was later taken into custody, but it's obvious which side of the fight he was on, after swerving to avoid hitting police and aiming for peaceful protesters several times during his rampage. On June 9th, things got severely worse for the peaceful protesters. Around 12:11 a.m., once again Trump escalated the situation by sending in 700 members of the Marines, a force of the military usually reserved for major combat operations, not against U.S. citizens. That morning when Trump returned to the White House from his weekend trip to Camp David, Trump told reporters it would be, quote, great if his army arrested California Governor Gavin Newsom. Later in the day, a journalist from Australia was reporting on the protest on the front lines in LA when one of Trump's goons in a police uniform noticed the camera being pointed in his direction. He took aim and fired his weapon at the reporter and her camera operator, hitting the reporter. Trump's goons then came out and said it would have been amazing if the police officer used real bullets to shoot the reporter instead of rubber bullets. Nearly at the same time across town, LAPD found a lone peaceful protester, surrounded him with police horses, and used their horses to trample his body. The peaceful protester tried to get to his feet, but a police officer on foot knocked him back onto the ground so the horses could once again trample on his body. Reports coming in claim the Crips and the Bloods, two rival gangs in LA, have actually paused their rivalry this week and have started handing out weapons to any peaceful protester that wants one to protect themselves from Trump's armed militia. Keep in mind, their rivalry goes back to 1971, and in the matter of one weekend, Trump made them come together to fight his goons. The next day, on June 10th, Trump told reporters that the peaceful protesters in LA were, quote, paid insurrectionists. These are paid troublemakers, end quote. Trump actually had the audacity to call peaceful protesting in LA an insurrection, when he is the only president in US history to ever actually commit insurrection on our country. Trump continued to say, quote, if there's an insurrection, I would certainly invoke it. We will see. And this line is the most damning in my opinion. For weeks now, Trump has been wanting and talking in his circle about invoking martial law, which would get rid of the Constitution, invoke military authority over everyone, suspend civil liberties like freedom to protest or media outlets to cover news, and more. But this quote shows what Trump is planning more than anything else he's ever said or done. Once you have a war to fight, invoking martial law is the next step. And Trump is starting a civil war with his actions in LA right now. Later on the same day, June 10th, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson was asked about Trump's wish to arrest the elected governor of California, and he responded by saying Trump was, quote, absolutely right to send in the National Guard. Mike Johnson then continued by saying, quote,
that's not my lane. I'm not going to give you legal analysis on whether Gavin Newsom should be arrested, but he ought to be tarred and feathered, I'll say that. I mean, look, he's standing in the way of the administration and the carrying out of federal law, right? He is applauding the bad guys and standing in the way of the good guys.
The current Speaker of the House just called for the elected governor of California to be physically tortured in a style not seen since the Middle Ages. Now, I don't agree with everything Gavin Newsom has ever said or done, but I genuinely don't understand how Mike Johnson is not being brought up on charges of treason in front of a military court right now. Some of you out there might say that LAPD doesn't really know how to handle any protest well, and that would be completely fair. LAPD has notoriously handled every protest horribly for a long time now. Some of you might also say that LAPD wanted this to get violent, but it seems they had no intention of that. On Sunday, June 8th, hundreds of their officers marched and took part in LA Pride, protecting LGBTQ people and marching in the Pride Parade. It was Trump's armed militia who committed the most violent acts against peaceful protesters. It wasn't until later when LAPD went violent. Now, is it just a coincidence that Trump sent his armed militia to LA the same weekend as LA Pride? Well, that's up for speculation. But one thing is for certain, Trump and all of his goons knew there would be a lot of LGBTQ people in LA that weekend, and he definitely wanted to squash that celebration. Very basically, Trump sent his armed militia to hurt people. Those people peacefully protested. Trump sent more of his militia to hurt them. Finally, those people had enough and started burning cars with no one inside of them. Trump then sent the Marines to hurt them, and then the LAPD started running people over with their horses. It's very obvious who the instigator here is, and that person currently sits on a self-made throne in Washington, with a literal army being amassed to protect him outside. While there are some bad actors in the crowd of protesters, thousands of these protesters are showing up in their business suits and leisure wear to hold signs and chant against Trump. They have no weapons, and they are still being targeted with both non-lethal and lethal force. They haven't done anything wrong, but they're being trampled by trucks, vans, and horses driven by Trump's militia members. While all of us are looking at Los Angeles right now, across the country, thousands of military vehicles are being transported in by train from as far away as Texas to the capital of DC. Now, if there really was a war at our southern border with Mexico, why is the president sending hundreds of tanks from Texas to Washington, D.C.? A few weeks ago, I watched Russia's military parade to try to understand why the alleged Russian agent Donald Trump would want a military parade for his birthday. This weekend's Trump parade is based on that Russian parade, but there were only a few dozen military vehicles in Putin's victory parade. So Trump doesn't need thousands of tanks for a silly parade, even if he were to compete against his commander, Vladimir Putin. It's almost as if he's sending his militia to incite violence in California, a week prior to a major event, which I highly doubt is just a parade. This way he could claim citizens are getting angry and declare martial law. We have gone way past normal, or even what we used to consider normal under Trump's first term. Yes, protesters are pulling the face mask off of Trump's militia members. We are finally finding out who these people are who are abducting our citizens and sending them to camps in other countries. And yes, protesters are doxing members of Trump's militia by sharing their names, addresses, and information online. But this behavior is what Trump has normalized. Trump and his goons, like the terrorist group Libs of TikTok, have been doxing teachers, librarians, doctors, nurses, and members of the LGBTQ community for years now. Proud Boys and other terrorist groups have made bomb threats to hospitals and schools. Plenty of other groups which not only support Trump, but that Trump himself has supported in the past, have broken federal crimes, all in the name of injuring liberals. But now that liberals are doing the same thing to Trump's militia, it's suddenly wrong. I'm so tired of one political party continually saying, we should all come together and get along. Meanwhile, Trump and his deplorable followers routinely not only cause us harm, but laugh as they do it. They see an innocent reporter from Australia get shot, and they wish that she was murdered instead of just injured. That's why we were all so confused when Trump made fun of a special needs person at one of his rallies, and his audience never stopped following him. He is racist, homophobic, transphobic, and outright un-American, and still he never lost support. Perhaps he's right. He could probably shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and get away with it without losing a single vote. When Trump told his military to shoot protesters so he can hold a Bible upside down and take a photo, his supporters cheered him on. When Trump said he grabs girls by their private parts, not even his female followers left his side. And when Elon Musk revealed what we all pretty much assumed to be true anyway, that Trump is on the Epstein list, none of his audience were bothered by the fact that Trump might be a pedophile, something they have accused liberals of being for decades. All of us in the media have been very confused why none of these things have derailed his political campaigns or career. There is nothing this man can do to lose support. It's not because he's a great person or a good businessman. After all, he bankrupted a casino and took hundreds of millions of dollars in bribes. His supporters love him, not in spite of the fact that he's a bully, but because he's a bully. Many of the people whom I know as bullies from my high school days have grown up to be Trump supporters. Now that they've grown up and somehow got jobs, they can't be bullies in their workplaces, so now they just donate and vote for a man who can act out their violent wishes, and in most cases, acts out those violent wishes against the same people they used to bully in high school. It's time we stop thinking about this as a compromise or coming together. The old Republican Party wanting to trim the national budget or oversight has long been dead and buried. We are now in a civil war with a side that still thinks they won the first Civil War, still wants slavery, still believes heavily in racism, still wants gays to be sent to camps rather than be in love, and still laughs when their enemies are in pain. If you look back at civil rights and the freedoms we've won, they have been hard-fought wars. Gay and transgender people would not have the limited freedoms we're graced with now if not for our ancestors who fought back against the police. Pride started as a riot at Stonewall. Everything Martin Luther King Jr. accomplished in his career, fighting for the rights of people of color, only came after Malcolm X showed racist cops that they can either compromise with MLK Jr. or they can have a brutal war that they're going to lose. Women peacefully protested for years before adopting increasingly militant tactics to gain equal rights during the British suffragette movement. Hell, even the founding of our country came after years of trying to compromise with the British over taxation. Eventually, colonists gave up trying to compromise and just declared ourselves a nation, sparking the American Revolution, which, tiny history lesson here, was finally won by two gay men named Friedrich Wilhelm von Steuben and George Washington, and an intersex person named Casimir Pulaski. The fact is, while fiscal conservatives like myself do believe we need a better solution for people to come to this country, and those that are here illegally need to have their day in court so they can at least go through the process of coming here in a legal way, abducting people, running people over in the street, shooting reporters, amassing the military to protect yourself, and calling for the physical torture and arrest of other elected officials is all deeply un-American. Democrats like to think the second Civil War could still be prevented, if only they win back some seats in the midterm elections in 2026. But the war has already started. The second Civil War began on January 6, 2021, when Trump's militia broke into a federal building to kill members of Congress and the vice president. At that time, the National Guard should have been sent in and arrested Trump, his cabinet, and every single person in his militia who attacked our Capitol. They should have all been dragged in front of a military court and tried for treason. The fact that it took the FBI years to find just 1,500 of them, and the fact that Trump was never charged with treason, means the second Civil War has already begun. We let the biggest enemy to our country get away with literal treason, and now he's amassing an army outside his front lawn while inciting violence in a liberal city on the other side of the country. At the end of the first Civil War, President Andrew Johnson, who was a Democrat by the way, signed the Amnesty Proclamation, which gave a full pardon to all those involved in the rebellion, trying to overthrow the United States government. My point is, we've seen it before, where Republicans attack our country, and then on the other side, Democrats always say we need compromise and have peace restored. But maybe in this second Civil War that we're all living through now, we won't be as frail. Maybe we do need a Democrat or maybe independent president to come in next and use some of these new executive powers against the people who said those executive powers were okay, as long as it was liberals who got hurt. Fool us once, shame on you. Fool us twice, shame on us. The second Civil War has begun. The first shots have been fired. Now it's up to us how we respond, and more importantly, who we forgive this time after the dust all settles. Get everything you need to show your pride and protest Convict Donald Trump, including hats, pins, stickers, keychains, and more at ProfessorPride.com. Special thanks to our members and subscribers this month for supporting our work, providing LGBTQ education and resources. Be sure to subscribe or click on this video to continue enjoying Powered by Rainbows.